the key point here, which again, the mainstream media won't pay attention to, which is Russia actually claimed to have had very negative and derogatory information about Hillary Clinton. That if they had chosen to release that in the weeks leading up to that November 2016 election, it would have very likely had a devastating...
The moment Tulsi Gabbard set her sights on Hillary Clinton, it was like watching a calm surgeon wheel in for the operation. Scalpel in hand, no wasted movements, no unnecessary drama. Unlike Hillary, who has spent her career as if auditioning for the role of history's most misunderstood villain, Tulsi has always had the uncanny to slice through the thick fog of political nonsense with just a few words. And with Hillary, there's an endless supply of nonsense to work with.
Hillary Clinton ordered John Brennan, who was CIA director at the time, and the intelligence community intentionally suppressed intelligence that showed Putin was saving the most damaging material that he had in his possession about Hillary, held back from leaking compromising material on Hillary Clinton prior to. In fact, this report shows Putin held back leaking.
Potential candidate, Hillary has somehow managed to touch every rung of the political ladder while leaving behind a trail of scandals, disasters, and cringeworthy moments that would tank any other politician for good. But not Hillary. Need to exaggerate. Hillary practically roasts herself every time she tries to reinvent her legacy. Hillary Clinton's career has been one long, drawn-out advertisement for how to fail upward, from First Lady to Senator to Secretary of State to President.
To the election, instead planning to release it after the election to weaken what Moscow viewed as an inevitable Clinton presidency. In the January 2017 intelligence community assessment that President Obama ordered.
That essentially the documents that Russia claimed they had portrayed Hillary Clinton as having mental health challenges that would result in fits of laughter and fits of rage. It also pointed out some very specific physical health concerns that apparently leaders within the DNC were discussing amongst each other.
That's right. This wasn't invented intelligence like the Steele dossier. This was supposedly emails
emails and communication
about what it really is. The story of someone who's been handed every opportunity and still managed to fumble each one like a quarterback with buttered hands. Hillary's been in politics longer than most voters have been alive. And yet her greatest achievement seems to be proving that name recognition alone can keep a career.
Into great detail about the information that Russia and Putin had on Hillary Clinton, which included possible criminal acts like secret meetings with multiple named U.S. religious organizations in which State Department officials offered, in exchange for supporting Secretary Clinton's campaign for the presidency, significant increases in financing from the State Department.
The man the media insisted was unelectable. That defeat wasn't just a political loss, it was the Super Bowl of political incompetence. Tulsi hammers that point by reminding people that Hillary didn't just stumble at the finish line, she tripped, face-planted, and then blamed the track for being uneven. But Hillary's defeat wasn't some fluke. It was on life support. Take the infamous 2016 election. The Democrats had every advantage: money, media, the cultural elites, and Hillary's favorite accessory, a Rolodex of high-powered friends. And yet, she lost to Donald Trump.
To that November 2016 election. The fact is, the opposite is true. It was intentionally withheld and not released because they assumed that Hillary Clinton would win that election. And their plan, according to these documents that were found in an investigation the House Intelligence Committee conducted into the CIA's creation of this January 27th.
Asking in the glow of Hollywood fundraisers, she strutted around as if the presidency was her birthright, not something to be earned. And when voters disagreed, she had the audacity to call them deplorable. Tulsi rips. It was the culmination of decades of arrogance and tone deafness. Tulsi doesn't need to shout it, she just points to the facts. Hillary thought the Rust Belt was a tourist attraction, not a voting bloc. She treated working-class Americans like an afterthought.
Also had documents that showed the patronage of the State Department to State Department employees who would go and support Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. There were high-level DNC emails that detailed evidence of Hillary's, quote, psycho-emotional problems, uncontrolled fits of anger, aggression, and cheerfulness, and that then Secretary Clinton was allegedly on a daily regimen of heavy.
It's a permanent stain on her resume. Americans died under her watch, and her response was a cocktail of excuses, deflections, and condescension. She sat in front of Congress, dodging accountability with the smugness of someone who truly believes rules don't apply to her. For Tulsi, who served in uniform, the sheer detachment of Hillary's response is more than just political. It's personal. Let's not forget the email scandal, a saga that perfectly encapsulated Hillary's career-long attitude toward transparency and accountability. Wiping servers, deleting emails, setting up private systems like a secret spy novel gone wrong, Hillary turned nothing to hide into a punchline. Through that moment like a hot knife through butter, because it's the perfect microcosm of who Hillary is. A woman so entitled she couldn't fathom that regular people might not want to hand her the keys to the Oval Office. And then there's Hillary's time as Secretary of State, which Tulsi treats like a buffet of blunders. Benghazi, for example.
Foreign policy has been a disaster for our country and the world. It's resulted in the deaths and injuries of so many of my brothers and sisters in uniform. It's devastated entire countries, millions of lives lost. Yet, despite this damage that you have done to our country and the world, you want to continue your failed policies, directly or indirectly through the Democratic nominee.
Hillary has used feminism like a prop, not a principle. She positioned herself as a glass ceiling breaker, but only when it suited her ambitions. Tulsi peels back that facade with surgical precision, pointing out the hypocrisy of someone who preaches empowerment but practices suppression when it's politically convenient. And speaking of Bill Clinton, Hillary has carried his baggage around like a Louis Vuitton suitcase with a broken novel gone wrong. Hillary turned nothing to hide into a punchline. She acted like security protocols were mere suggestions, optional checkboxes she could ignore because, well, she was Hillary. Tulsi exposes this for what it really was: arrogance dressed up as convenience. The same arrogance that cost her trust, cost her credibility, and ultimately cost her the White House. The irony of Hillary Clinton is that she has spent her entire career painting herself as a champion of women. Yet Tulsi Gabbard shows how her record tells a very different story.
That the Democratic Party leaders, people like Hillary Clinton, people who've been in charge for a very long time, foment this kind of culture of fear and like, hey, if you go against us, like, you're dead, 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 you're.
From her cheerleading for the Iraq War to her disastrous push for regime change in Libya, Hillary has left behind a trail of chaos. Tulsi, who has spent years warning against endless wars and reckless interventions, calls out Hillary's hawkish tendencies with the credibility of someone who's actually been to the battlefield. Hillary, on the other hand, has treated war like a board game: push a few pieces around, topple a dictator, and act surprised when the region erupts into chaos. Libya didn't just collapse after Gaddafi, it became a failed state, a breeding ground for terrorism, and a humanitarian disaster. Can handle. No matter how hard she tries to rebrand herself, she can't escape the shadow of her husband's scandals.
I think dead.
The Monica Lewinsky debacle, the parade of accusations, the Oval Office circus, it's all tethered to her narrative. Tulsi doesn't need to dwell on it for long. She simply highlights the fact that Hillary's political career has always been tied to cleaning up after Bill's messes, or at least spinning them into something less damaging. Far from being her own independent figure, Hillary's entire ascent is inseparable from the Clinton brand, which is less about public service and more about self-preservation. Hillary's foreign policy record is another goldmine for Tulsi.
It's time for you to acknowledge the damage that you've caused. And it is long past time for you to step down from your throne so that the Democratic Party can lead with a new foreign policy, which will actually be in the interest of and benefit to the American people and the world.
Joining us now with reaction, Congresswoman, 2020 Democratic candidate, war veteran herself, Tulsi Gabbard. Congresswoman, first, thank you for serving your country. And
thank you.
About politics, corruption, entitlement, double standards, and the endless recycling of failed leadership. Tulsi Gabbard dismantles this myth of inevitability by showing that Hillary is not a symbol of progress, but of stagnation. She is the embodiment of an establishment that prioritizes power over principle, connections over competence, and excuses over accountability. What makes Tulsi's takedown so effective and a humanitarian disaster? And yet, Hillary smirked on camera, seemingly proud of her handiwork. Tulsi drives this point home, contrasting real sacrifice with Hillary's flippant foreign policy misadventures. But perhaps Tulsi's most devastating blow is aimed at Hillary's inability to accept responsibility. Every failure, every scandal, every setback is always someone else's. James Comey, sexism, the media, the Electoral College. Hillary has blamed everyone and everything except herself. Tulsi shines a spotlight on this endless blame game, exposing it as the behavior of someone.
What's Hillary Clinton like? You're probably the only person in this room who would know.
It wouldn't surprise you to know that she's not too fond of me.
She hates you like the devil hates holy water.
So when I resigned as vice chair of the DNC in 2016, specifically so that I could campaign against Hillary Clinton in that Democratic primary.
Remembered as the first female president, a historic trailblazer. Instead, Tulsi Gabbard ensures she's remembered as the woman who had every advantage, every opportunity, and still managed to lose to Donald Trump. And the more Hillary tries to insert herself back into the conversation through books, documentaries, speaking tours, and cryptic hints about another run, the more Tulsi's dismantling of her credibility resonates. Because what makes Tulsi's takedown so effective is her delivery. She doesn't shout, she doesn't grandstand, she calmly lays out the evidence brick by brick until the entire edifice of Hillary's carefully manufactured image collapses under its own weight. Hillary has spent decades trying to construct a legacy of strength, perseverance, and resilience. But Tulsi demonstrates that behind the facade lies a politician who has coasted on privilege, stumbled through leadership, and clung to relevance by recycling the same tired excuses. Hillary Clinton wanted to be. Each reappearance is a reminder that Hillary can't let go, can't face the reality that her moment has passed. Tulsi doesn't need to shout her down. All she has to do is hold up a mirror, and Hillary's record does the rest of the damage. At the end of the day, Tulsi Gabbard doesn't just roast Hillary Clinton.
That's exactly right.
What do you know about
If you
that?
remember when we go back and Hillary Clinton's emails were really making headlines in a lot of ways and for a lot of reasons.
Her missing emails.
Yes, exactly. And so when people look at the newly declassified Durham appendix, you'll see a number of quite shocking statements in there coming from people like then DNC chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, talking about how, and I'm paraphrasing here, but Hillary Clinton's emails were deleted just in time.
Influence or media support can overcome the simple truth. You can't sell what the people aren't buying. And Tulsi leaves it open because Hillary, true to form, will always try to stage a comeback, which only gives Gabbard more material to dismantle, more myths to debunk, and more hypocrisy to expose. Tulsi doesn't just point this out, she methodically demonstrates it, showing how Hillary's efforts to stay relevant only highlight what she's lost: trust, credibility, relevance, and most cruelly, the momentum reformists once thought she represented. Hillary's political career away the spin, the excuses, and the endless attempts at reinvention. What's left isn't the fearless feminist icon or the master strategist Hillary so desperately wants to be seen as. What's left is a politician whose career is a case study in failure, whose legacy is built on missteps.
I was at, I think it was the first debate, the first primary debate that they had, first or second. It was one of the early ones. And I was doing an interview with MSNBC outside the hall of the debate. I think it was in Miami. And I don't remember who the host was, but I could see them and hear them in my ear. And they said, "Tulsi Gabbard, you're coming out and criticizing Hillary Clinton and her foreign policy record. Aren't you afraid of what she'll do to you?" He asked me this on live television on MSNBC. And you're laughing. I laughed too. I was like, no, I am not afraid of what Hillary Clinton...
And most cruelly, the momentum reformists once thought she represented. Hillary's political career has had every tool at its disposal: name recognition, donor networks, a loyal media class, and her own establishment brand. Yet time and again, she's used these assets not to push boundaries, but to prop herself up. Tulsi hammers home the irony that someone who had so much never really moved anything forward. Not policy, not discourse, not societal progress. Gabbard's critique cuts deep. Hillary's platform wasn't about changing the game, it was about keeping the power in the hands of those who've always held it. The most damning part of Tulsi's dismantling is how it contrasts authenticity with artifice. Clinton, with her prepared talking points and political conditioning, represents the machine. Gabbard, by contrast, offers real-world stakes, a soldier's perspective, and a willingness to go where it hurts, because she, unlike Hillary, actually has lived the consequences of policy decisions. It's not just opposition, it's a generational divide between the canned politician and the wounded patriot demanding accountability. Hillary has spent her career arguing she gets it, that she understands grassroots, understands struggle, understands the moment. Tulsi stands fasting, fatigued, and fearless, telling truth to power, not towing the line. If the question is who represents the future, one who recalibrates the system, or one who spent a lifetime preserved by it, Tulsi's answer couldn't be clearer. And that's the final blow. Hillary Clinton, for all her ambition and prestige, stands as a monument to what the establishment looks like when it's unwilling to change. Tulsi doesn't just knock her down, she pulls back the curtain, and what the world sees isn't a heroine, but a relic.